December 18th, 1964. The Beverly Hills Hotel's Crystal Ballroom glittered with understated Hollywood elegance. 250 of the entertainment industry's most powerful figures sat at round tables draped in white linen, crystal glasses catching chandelier light. This was Frank Sinatra's annual charity gala, an exclusive gathering where careers were made over champagne and whispered conversations. Frank Sinatra held court at the center table, surrounded by Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and Joey Bishop. The Rat Pack was in full force. Established crooners like Tony Bennett and Vic Damone worked the room with easy confidence. Jazz legends like Ella Fitzgerald and Count Basie commanded respectful attention. And then there was Andy Williams. If you want to discover how one underestimated performance changed everything, hit subscribe now and tell us in the comments about a time when someone underestimated you. At 37, Andy had achieved remarkable success. His NBC variety show pulled massive ratings. His recording of Moon River had become synonymous with sophisticated American popular music. He'd performed at the Academy Awards, sold millions of records, and earned mainstream success most entertainers could only dream about. But television success was different from music industry respect. In December 1964, that distinction mattered more than Andy cared to admit. The invitation had come through NBC, not from Frank personally. Andy's manager had been thrilled. This is your entrance into the real inner circle. But Andy understood the hierarchy. He wasn't invited as an equal. He was invited as the television guy who'd earned enough commercial success to warrant acknowledgement. Still, he'd accepted. Andy Williams had built his career on graciousness, on showing up when it mattered. Besides, what was the worst that could happen? He was about to find out. Andy arrived that evening in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his signature warmth on display as he greeted other guests. He moved through the cocktail reception with practiced charm, playing the grateful newcomer. Some people were genuinely pleased to see him. Others offered polite nods that barely concealed indifference. The evening's format was elegant in its simplicity. After dinner, select performers would offer brief musical tributes to legendary composer Harold Arlen. It was intimate, showcasing artistry rather than spectacle. The kind of event where reputation was made or confirmed with a single song. Andy had been placed at table 12, far from the center of power. His performance slot was dead last, after all the established names. 5 minutes at most. Just enough time to prove he belonged, or confirm every skeptic's belief that he didn't. After the main course, the performances began. One by one, America's finest interpreters of popular song took the small stage. Each performance was a masterclass in musical sophistication. Andy watched from his distant table, mentally preparing. He'd chosen The Way You Look Tonight, a classic that required both technical skill and emotional depth. 20 minutes before his performance, Andy made his way toward the backstage area. The hotel had converted a small dining room into a makeshift staging area. There, adjusting his bow tie in a small mirror, Andy's world shifted. Two voices carried clearly through thin walls. He recognized them immediately. Marcus Sterling, one of the era's most respected jazz crooners, and Richard Hampton, an influential music critic whose reviews could make or break careers. After Sinatra finishes, "We've got this Williams fellow," Sterling was saying, his voice carrying casual dismissiveness. "Andy Williams?" Hampton's tone suggested mild confusion. "What's he doing here?" "Television money talks, I suppose." NBC probably twisted Frank's arm. "You know how these variety show hosts are. They sing a few pleasant songs for housewives, and suddenly they think they're real performers." Andy's hand stilled on his bow tie. Through the mirror, he could see his reflection. Composed, professional, but with something hardening in his eyes. "Have you heard him perform live?" Hampton asked. "Why would I need to? I've seen his television show. Very nice, very safe, very suburban. He's got a pleasant enough voice, I'll give him that. But there's a difference between entertaining families in their living rooms and performing for people who actually understand music. Still, Moon River was quite successful." Sterling's laugh was patronizing. "Chart success and artistic merit are two different things, Richard. Williams found a pretty song, recorded it pleasantly, and wrote it to fame. But put him in a room with serious musicians, and the difference becomes obvious. He's a television performer, not a recording artist. So what do you expect tonight? Exactly what you'd expect. He'll sing something safe, the audience will applaud politely, and then we'll move on to the real purpose of the evening. Frank's being gracious by including him, but everyone knows this is charity in more ways than one. The two men moved away. Andy remained in front of the mirror, studying his reflection. For a moment, his careful composure wavered. The hurt was real and sharp, but beneath the hurt was something else. Quiet, burning determination. 5 minutes later, Andy Williams walked back into the crystal ballroom. Something fundamental had changed. He no longer carried himself like a grateful guest hoping to prove his worth. He moved with calm confidence of a man who had just remembered exactly who he was. Then Frank Sinatra took the stage to introduce the final performer. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank said, "please welcome Andy Williams." The applause was polite but restrained. Andy rose from his distant table and made his way to the stage, acknowledging scattered smiles with gracious humility. Some guests checked their watches. Others reached for champagne, settling in for what they assumed would be a pleasant but unremarkable conclusion. Andy took his place at the microphone, adjusted the stand with deliberate care, and looked out at the audience. 250 faces, most friendly, but few showing particular anticipation. At table 3, he could see Marcus Sterling leaning back, wine glass in hand, the picture of polite resignation. For just a moment, Andy's gaze found Sterling's eyes. Something passed between them. Not anger, not challenge, just quiet acknowledgement of what was about to happen. Then Andy nodded to the pianist and began to sing. The opening phrase of "The Way You Look Tonight" emerged like liquid gold. Not the pleasant, television-friendly voice millions knew, but something deeper, more complex, more achingly beautiful. The ballroom went completely silent. This wasn't the safe, suburban interpretation Sterling had predicted. This was a masterclass in vocal artistry. Andy's phrasing was impeccable, his breath control flawless, his emotional connection so profound that the song seemed to create itself in real time. Every note was placed with surgical precision, every word weighted with meaning beyond surface romance. At table 3, Marcus Sterling's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. Andy moved through the song like he was conducting a private conversation with each person in the room. His voice soared on high notes with effortless power, then dropped to intimate whispers that somehow carried to every corner. The arrangement was sophisticated beyond expectations. Not simple television accompaniment, but complex interplay between voice and piano that marked true artistry. This was jazz singing at its finest. This was popular music elevated to art. This was everything Sterling and his peers claimed to value, delivered with authority that made their recent performances seem merely competent. The audience sat transfixed. Conversation stopped entirely. Waiters paused. Even Frank Sinatra leaned forward with obvious interest. Andy's interpretation of the bridge section was particularly stunning. Instead of straightforward romantic reading, he found layers of melancholy and hope that transformed familiar lyrics into something revelatory. His voice climbed and fell with musical intelligence that couldn't be taught, only felt. As Andy approached the conclusion, he made a choice that elevated his performance from excellent to unforgettable. Instead of the expected vocal flourish, he brought his voice down to barely above a whisper, making the final phrase sound like the most intimate secret ever shared. The effect was mesmerizing. The last note faded into absolute silence. For seconds that felt like minutes, nobody moved. Then slowly, deliberately, Frank Sinatra began to applaud. Not polite recognition, but genuine appreciation from one artist to another. The room erupted. People rose to their feet, applauding with enthusiasm entirely absent from earlier responses. This wasn't courtesy applause. This was recognition. This was respect. Frank Sinatra was already moving toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank said, his voice carrying new warmth, "I think we just witnessed something special." He turned to Andy, extending his hand. "That was beautiful, kid. Really beautiful." As Andy made his way back through the ballroom, the response was entirely different. People stood to shake his hand. At table 7, Tony Bennett caught his eye and mouthed, "Beautiful job." Ella Fitzgerald smiled and applauded again as he passed. But it was the moment when Andy passed table 3 that would stay with him forever. Marcus Sterling rose from his seat. For a moment, the two men looked at each other. Then Sterling extended his hand. "I was wrong," Sterling said quietly. "Dead wrong. That was extraordinary." Andy took the offered hand. "Thank you," he said simply. No anger, no triumph, just quiet acknowledgement between professionals. "I mean it," Sterling continued. "That's some of the finest singing I've heard in years. Television or no television." The shift was total and immediate. Record producers wanted to discuss projects. Jazz club owners extended invitations. Musicians who had treated him politely but distantly now engaged him in detailed conversations about his performance. 2 days later, Marcus Sterling called Andy personally to invite him to perform at the prestigious Monterey Jazz Festival. "We need voices like yours," he said. "Real voices." Within a month, Andy was fielding offers from recording labels wanting to work on jazz projects. Columbia Records suddenly began discussing more sophisticated arrangements for his next album. But the most meaningful recognition came from Frank Sinatra himself. 3 weeks later, Frank called Andy directly. "Kid," Frank said, "I've been thinking about what you did at the Gala. That wasn't just good singing, that was art. How'd you like to work the Copa Room with me next month? I could use a class act like you." The Copa Room at the Sands, the inner sanctum of American entertainment. "I'd be honored, Frank," Andy replied. "Good. And Andy, don't change a thing. That television show, the mainstream success, that's smart business. But what you did the other night, that's why we do this in the first place." Years later, several people who attended that December evening would cite Andy Williams's performance as one of the most surprising displays of pure vocal artistry they'd ever witnessed. Marcus Sterling, who became a genuine friend, would often tell the story of the night he learned not to judge an artist by his platform. "I thought I knew what Andy Williams was," Sterling would say decades later. "I thought television success meant artistic compromise. I was completely embarrassingly wrong. That night, he taught me the difference between knowing someone's reputation and understanding their artistry." Tony Bennett, in his autobiography, devoted an entire page to describing Andy's performance. "It reminded me why I got into this business in the first place," Bennett wrote. "Pure, honest music." Frank Sinatra would occasionally reference that December evening in later interviews. "Andy Williams proved something important that night," Frank said in 1967. "He proved that real talent finds a way to shine through, no matter what people expect from you." The performance lasted less than 6 minutes, but those 6 minutes changed everything. Andy Williams had arrived at the Beverly Hills Hotel as a successful television entertainer, hoping for acceptance from the music establishment. He left as something else entirely, a respected artist who happened to host a television show. The difference was profound and permanent. His variety show continued for 7 more years, but now industry professionals watched differently. Guest artists began requesting appearances specifically to work with Andy, knowing his musical intelligence would elevate their own performances. The recording industry's perception shifted dramatically. Andy's albums began appearing in jazz sections of record stores. Music critics who had dismissed him as a television personality started reviewing his work with the same seriousness brought to established jazz artists. Most importantly, Andy had learned something crucial. Commercial success and artistic respect weren't mutually exclusive. The key was never compromising your artistry, regardless of platform. Looking back on that December evening, Andy would always remember it as the night he stopped trying to prove he belonged and simply showed them who he was. The difference between those two approaches was everything. In the end, Marcus Sterling had been right about one thing. There was indeed a difference between television performers and serious musicians. Andy Williams just happened to be both.